Am I surprised that the Supreme Court did what we all knew they were going to do? No. But I was trying to find a silver lining in the story, and I think I found one. If you live in a bubble, on Monday night, Politico published what they said was a first draft of a ruling that would overturn Roe v. Wade. It was written by Samuel Alito, who's one of the most conservative members of an already conservative court. Even the Chief Justice has since said that was indeed an authentic draft. Now, first drafts usually get rewritten many times over, and it's possible that a less extreme ruling from someone like John Roberts swayed one of the more conservative justices. We won't know until the final decision is announced in June. But the bottom line, no matter how this plays out, is that abortion rights are no longer going to be guaranteed nationwide. If you live in a state run by Republicans, you will, very soon, not be able to obtain a safe abortion, which means people without resources to travel to another state are in a whole lot of trouble. And if Republicans ever regain control of Congress and the presidency as soon as 2024, they will 100% try to ban abortion nationwide after 6 weeks, before most women even know they're pregnant. Because they don't actually like freedom. And if you're thinking, they can't do that, who's gonna stop them? A Supreme Court whose majority is only there to implement a right-wing agenda? Nobody. 24 states are already on the verge of banning abortion almost entirely as soon as the Supreme Court gives them the green light to do so. And if the draft decision looks anything close to the final one, they're about to get that chance. This abortion ruling, if it comes to pass, would represent the culmination of decades of right-wing activism, especially when it comes to the court itself. Let's talk about that for a second, because there are these 6 conservative judges on the court, and it's important to remember how they got there. Republicans made opposing abortion rights a litmus test for federal judges. Republicans blocked President Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, from even getting a hearing in 2016 so they could install Neil Gorsuch a year later. To put it another way, Republicans changed the size of the court to 8 until it was politically convenient for them to change it back to 9. These are the same people who pretend changing the size of the court would be blasphemy. Republicans also stymied a full investigation into Brett Kavanaugh so he could claim another seat without alienating the few moderate GOP senators who didn't love him. Republicans shoved through Amy Coney Barrett in a matter of weeks after the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and after people already had started voting for Joe Biden so that Democrats wouldn't have the opportunity to replace her. All 3 of those people were nominated by Donald Trump, who lost the popular vote, but always maintained support among Republicans precisely because he outsourced his judicial picks to the Federalist Society, which only boosts anti-abortion conservative judges. Republicans have completely ignored the growing concerns about Clarence Thomas and his wife because his predictable votes are far more important to them than his ethics. And of course, John Roberts and Samuel Alito were appointed by President George W. Bush, who also lost the popular vote and was only in office because a 5-4 conservative-leaning Supreme Court prevented votes from being counted in the decisive state of Florida. All of that is to say that there is an argument to be made that none of the justices who are about to overturn Roe should be on the bench at all. But they are there, and they're about to do the thing they were appointed to do. So, with all that in mind, what's the silver lining? And I'll admit the silver lining is not exactly shiny. It's more like a very faint, fading silver point. Well, there is a chance that all these moves could now backfire on the conservative Christians who made it happen. That wouldn't make up for the damage of what's about to happen, but there's a long-term view that is worth keeping in mind while Republicans celebrate a potential major short-term win. And it'll backfire because most Americans support abortion rights, and because protecting the unborn has always sounded better than it actually is in practice. And when people who aren't paying attention realize what's about to happen, maybe they will be mad enough to fight back. It helps to remember that the modern Christian right wasn't always laser focused on anti-abortion activism. In fact, white evangelicals didn't even care about the issue much until several years after the Supreme Court decided Roe v. Wade. Let me repeat that. Roe was decided in 1973. If you read books written by prominent Christian apologists and evangelical leaders at the time, it wasn't a controversial ruling. They didn't care. While white evangelical leaders want you to believe that Christians have always opposed abortion, that view, as blogger Fred Clark so memorably put it, is younger than the Happy Meal. Here are some examples of what I mean. A 1968 issue of Christianity Today, the magazine founded by evangelist Billy Graham, included essays that said things like, "God does not regard the fetus as a soul, no matter how far gestation has progressed." The former Southern Baptist Convention president, Wayne Dehoney, said in 1976 that Catholics had it wrong with their anti-abortion theology because, quote, "the soul is formed at breath, not with conception." Southern Baptists, at the very least, adopted a resolution in 1971 allowing for abortion in many unfortunate circumstances, seeing it as a sensible middle ground. A 1971 book by the Christian theologian Dr. Norman Geisler said very bluntly, "The one clear thing which the scriptures indicate about abortion is that it is not the same as murder, because an unborn baby is not fully human." They all believe in objective morality, unless something becomes really unpopular in their world, in which case they'll just change scripture to suit their needs. So what changed for them? Why did these people who didn't think abortion was a deal breaker decide it was the only thing that mattered? The growing right-wing movement within the white evangelical world decided that supporting segregation, which was a cause they loved, was no longer a winning issue for them. Seriously, the culture warriors of the time wanted to make sure private Christian schools like Bob Jones University could retain their tax-exempt status while banning black students and opposing interracial dating. They lost that fight, thankfully. But seeing the writing on the wall, those right-wing Christian leaders knew they needed a new issue to galvanize their people. Promoting racism, openly anyway, wasn't going to work. Now they just do it in more subtle ways. Anyway, reinterpreting scripture to argue against abortion rights turned out to be a winning horse. They figured out what atheists have always known. You can get the Bible to support any position you want. Historian Randall Balmer says all of this solidified around 1979. Evangelicals seized on abortion not for moral reasons, but as a rallying cry to deny President Jimmy Carter a second term. If Roe is now overturned, it would undoubtedly be seen as a moral victory for the millions of conservative Protestants and Catholics who are ignorant of that history and who falsely think they are saving millions of lives. But it would also require them to shift gears. It's always easy to express concern about the unborn and the dead, because doing so requires no actual responsibility. And it's no surprise that many conservative churches only ever seem to care about those two groups in particular, the ones who aren't born and the ones who are no longer alive. Because those two groups don't need anything from you. They don't ask anything of you. And they never point out how wrong you are. These Christians constantly talk about protecting fetuses and preparing for the afterlife, while mostly neglecting the people who suffer as a result of their broken theology. Yeah, they might do mission work or volunteer work, but they oppose the kind of systemic, massive changes that could make a real difference in people's lives. And they have the audacity to call themselves pro-life. It is not just a talking point or a joke to say anti-abortion activists stop caring about those fetuses the moment they exit the womb. They care about life that doesn't exist, and their policy positions reflect that. They tend to oppose every piece of progressive legislation that would help people without resources and make life better for the most marginalized among us. These people want those people to suffer. I swear, I am getting to the silver lining. If the Alito draft ruling holds up, instead of merely opposing abortion, conservatives might have to defend the idea of forcing women to give birth even in extreme cases of rape and incest. They would have to explain why women should be forced to endure the horrors of an ectopic pregnancy once they learn how women's bodies work and what a fallopian tube is. They would have to explain how they plan to care for the babies that will be born in the worst circumstances imaginable. And look, sure, they will inevitably find new talking points, but pretending they care about fetuses is a hell of a lot easier than defending the potential repercussions of sexual assault and abuse that can lead to unwanted pregnancies. Simply put, the lives of American women will be in more danger because white evangelicals got what they wanted. And that fact is not just bad for women, it's bad for Christianity as a whole, and it's bad for organized religion. Consider this: the conservative Christians who oppose abortion effectively want to force little girls impregnated by their fathers to give birth against their will. That is not merely a hypothetical. It happens. And just because that's rare doesn't mean it's non-existent. And every single extremist who thinks abortion should still be impermissible in that scenario needs to be held accountable for it. It is not enough to simply say, well, it's not the baby's fault. I've said this in a previous video, but one of my favorite questions to ask Christians is whether Anne Frank is burning in hell right now. Because if they genuinely believe you need to accept Christ to be saved, then a Jewish girl who was a victim of the Holocaust is still suffering today. They might rationalize it by saying maybe she got saved in the attic or whatever, which did not happen. But that's the logical result of their beliefs. Non-Christians will suffer forever. And it's important to make them admit that. Well, the same principle applies here. The conservative Christians, the anti-abortion Catholics, the Southern Baptists who cheer on the Supreme Court, will now have to explain why the victims of rape should have lifelong reminders of that assault. Or why a woman whose life is at risk because of a pregnancy should have to go through with it anyway, because that is what's going to happen in many red states. Those are immoral, cruel positions to hold, but those are the things they believe. We need to broadcast that to people who are not listening and hold their feet to the fire to defend those barbaric views. Because no answer they give is going to be a good one. We need to make sure they are blamed for the lives those babies are going to have, because by and large, they are not going to be ideal. And just because some of those children make it out okay, doesn't mean everyone else will. And those children will suffer because right-wing politicians voted in by conservative Christians got what they wanted. It is also likely, by the way, that the people currently fighting to ban abortions will move to restrict access to contraception and birth control, which is a much more difficult argument to make. That's not a slippery slope argument either, since this was always about imposing their morality on everybody else. That is where the path leads. And moving from accusations of murder to preventing other people from enjoying consensual sex is a leap that most Americans will not take. Check this out. An anti-abortion Christian who worked to elect Barack Obama said in a tweet that Democrats were extreme on abortion, which is stupid because they are not, but then added, if the conservative position is actually rooted in compassion, they will act on health care, paid family leave, and child care post-Roe. Basically saying, if you want to ban abortion, you better help these kids after they're born. Okay, well, a fundamentalist Christian woman named Lori Alexander chimed in by saying, I agree. I'm just kidding. She said, no! We encourage women to not have sex before marriage, marry a godly man, stay committed for life, bear children, and raise them to know and love God. This is the solution, not more big, inefficient, and corrupt government programs. Which is a really weird way to prove my point. Her entire agenda is making sure women marry a Christian man and never have sex with anyone else, and nothing else matters. She's not a parody, by the way. She is living proof of how everything liberals have been saying about the anti-abortion side is accurate. They really don't want to help these kids after they're born. And even if you think she's an anomaly, which she is not, the point is this. For years now, conservative Christians have been like dogs chasing after a car. And now they're about to catch it. And they have no clue what to do next. They are not prepared for the next steps. Which actually leads to another silver lining. Maybe this is the sort of ruling that can shake sensible people who try to ignore these issues out of their stupor. Overturning Roe would rightly anger many of the 59% of Americans who currently say abortion should be legal in all or most cases, along with many other Americans who don't have strong feelings about the issue. Yet. If they don't care now, they're going to. And a lot of those people who are against abortion may very well change sides when they realize the damage they are about to unleash upon the world. They've always been told they're supporting a righteous cause, but they've never been told what the country will look like when women are forced to give birth against their will. They have no clue. Voting against Republicans would be the simplest way for them to fight back. And that's where it gets interesting. Some conservative voters, having accomplished their goal, could end up not voting at all because of a sudden lack of urgency. It's no secret that Republicans have always benefited more from saying they would overturn Roe than ever actually doing it. It's a lot easier to raise money saying, give us cash so we can do this, than saying, give us cash because we're done. In 2017, The New Yorker even published an article about this saying, Republicans have been able to embrace anti-abortion absolutism while avoiding the political repercussions of putting this absolutism into practice. It's time to put the blame where it belongs. The pro-abortion side is not the side of cruelty. It never has been. Unfortunately, it may take a ruling like this to show that to people. If abortion rights are taken away, the resulting chaos and unthinkable suffering should be blamed on those conservatives. Keep in mind that many of the states that will ban abortion have no exceptions for rape or incest or the life of the mother. And I hope a lot of Americans who may be on the fence politically or who claim to be independents are finally motivated to pick a damn side. Seriously, it's always been a dumb thing to say both parties are the same. Because it doesn't make you look smart, it actually reveals how little you understand about the subject. But it really looks stupid right now. There is a difference between one party absolutely committed to hurting women and another that wants to protect them but can't because literally two senators are standing in their way. Now, to be sure, none of this hopeful backlash is guaranteed. I think Martin Luther King Jr. actually got this one wrong. The arc of the moral universe does not bend toward justice unless we make it. The Sandy Hook Massacre, for example, didn't significantly overturn the proliferation of weapons in this country. But school shootings sure as hell created a generation of young people, eventual politicians, eager to pass gun safety legislation. And a ruling to overturn abortion rights may force a lot of young people who might not have otherwise cared to get involved politically. This ruling might break the spell for people who didn't think it was a big deal. There are numbers to back that up, by the way, as noted last year by Slate's William Salatan. 45% of Republicans and 51% of pro-life respondents said that they'd be more interested in voting in 2022 if the justice were to overturn Roe. But among Democrats and pro-choice respondents, the numbers were significantly higher, 66% and 69% respectively. This is an issue we can jump on. It has the advantage of being both politically strategic and morally right. By finally getting what they've always said they wanted, Republicans and the conservative Christians who support them may have shot themselves in the foot. But it's up to everyone else to make sure they pay a price for it.